How to Pronounce Knife, starring Souvankham, Thammavongsa, and Pariyappa Amonwanichesan. Souvankham won Canada's most prestigious award, the Scotia Bank Giller Prize in 2020, for her collection of short stories of hope, loss, and heartache. She will be joined by Pariyappa Amonwanichesan, who is a strong advocate for the promotion of English literature translations of Thai literature, as well as an avid reader of Thai literature. Together, they will discuss what it means to be a writer through thoughtful mediation of their careers.
In case you don't know, I'm going to do a PowerPoint show, and then I'm going to read from my book, and then we'll do the Q&A. So don't look at me, look at the screen. Hello. My name is Souvankham Thammavongsa. At the Bangkok Literature Festival, it is not the longest name or difficult to pronounce. You might have heard of Margaret Atwood, Michael Ondaatje, Alice Munro. I live where they do, Canada. My parents built a raft made of bamboo to get to a Lao refugee camp in Nong Khai, Thailand. I was born here. This is my first time back. The last time I was here, I looked like this. That's me there in the middle. This is why you'll understand when I am asked what it was like. I don't remember. That's my father. On the left. Behind us are things he made. He made those things every day. I learn from him. You must make your art wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you have. When I was 7, I wanted to be an actress. I auditioned for Little Red Riding Hood. I didn't know the story. When the wolf followed me, I ran away. When the wolf came for me, I kicked him. I didn't get the part. I was told that's not how the story goes. I asked, well, who makes the story go? The writer. The writer, they said, makes the story go. I wanted to be that then, the one who makes the story go. But I didn't know how to become a writer. I grew up in a home without books. Anytime I saw a bookshelf, I begged my parents to take a picture of me in front of one, like people do when they go on vacation and take pictures of things they think they won't ever get to see again. I knew a writer writes, so I wrote and wrote, printed and bound my books and sold them out of my school knapsack on front lawns, at small press fairs. I was often asked, what is this? I waited for them to figure it out. And when they still wanted to know, I said, a book. It is said a writer has to write. That might be true. But for me, I want to write. No one teaches you that want in the first place. And it can take so long to form a want. There is always something coming to take your want. That you have it is worth holding on to. No one tells you to spend 12 years looking for one word. That one sentence that then becomes possibly a thing no one will ever hear about or get to see. You have to want to try and make that anyway, if you're a writer. I wrote a book, how to pronounce knife, about immigrants and refugees. You could say, I'm up to much more. I wrote about language, the ways it can fail you, how funny and strange and marvelous. When I was a kid, I didn't know how to pronounce knife. I asked my parents, and they told me. I went to school and was told we don't pronounce the K. I was not ashamed or embarrassed or humiliated. I laughed and laughed and laughed. That there is a letter right there, the first one in the front, and everyone agrees. The sound isn't even there. A writer has to want to bother to see and hear when we don't. I get to be the one who makes the story go. I get to be the one who wants. My parents worked in factories. A nail polish factory, a candy factory, a cake factory. They always found something beautiful to say about their work. That sweet smell of nail polish. Gum is like food, but you can chew the thing forever. Every cake is going to someone celebrating their joy. It is a wonderful thing to make joy. My parents always gave me a room of my own. It takes a writer to find something to love about what is here in front of them. It takes a writer to love what they have. My parents are not writers, but writers don't have to come from writers. They can come from homes without books, a language they don't know, and try to make a story go, and try to have a want in the world, even if no one will know about it. You know, now that you have the author here, I think it's important to hear her read from her own work. So I'm just going to read a few passages from my book, and then we'll do a Q&A, and we can open it up to you. You'll probably notice I'm not wearing that the chain that says I'm the speaker, because I feel like that I'm like everyone in this audience, that I'm not wearing one. Chickachee. When we go to the door, we stood the doorbell like Dad told us to do. That's how you know it's a nice house, he had said. It's so big, no one inside would hear a knock at the front door. So you have to push a button to ring a bell. I lifted my brother up and he pressed the doorbell once and again, and then I let him down softly. A light came on and a woman with brown shoulder-length hair and blunt bangs opened the door. She wore glasses and had a friendly smile. She said, "Well, now you're a ghost and you are, oh my, look at that costume. Now isn't that a sight? Where'd you get it? Did your mother make it?" I was too nervous to answer her, so I whispered, "Chickachee." "Oh, Harold, come out here. These children are just so adorable. Harold, get out here." Harold came to the door, shuffling his fluffy slippers along the floor. "Chickachee," I said again, softly. Harold gave a laugh and said, "Elaine, that is so adorable. Give the kids a little, won't you?" And he reached for a large glass bowl from somewhere behind the door and dropped 2 bags of potato chips in each pillowcase. As soon as the treats were in our pillowcases, we both shouted, "Chickachee," and ran away from the house, giggling like we'd gotten away with something we never thought we could have. At school the next day, my brother and I took out our candies at lunch and displayed them on a table like we were street vendors, telling our friends we went Chickachee, where the houses were gigantic. Our friends had kept to their buildings or the houses next door, or hadn't gone out at all, so they only had these little gumballs or 1 or 2 tiny chocolate bars. We had bags and bags of chips, whole chocolate bars and packs of gum, and there was more waiting for us at home. The lunch woman on duty leaned through the crowd around us and said, "Don't you mean you went trick-or-treating?" We shook our heads. The woman did not know what she was talking about. I looked up at her big, round, intrusive face, and said, "No, Mrs. Furman, we went Chickachee." edge of the world. My parents went to parties to hear the news from back home or to ask what happened to those they left behind. Who was still there? Was their house still standing? And if they made it out of Laos, which refugee camp did they end up in? How long were they there? Where did they land? When my parents read the newspaper or watched the evening news, they never heard about anything that was happening in their country. It was almost as if it didn't exist. My father was often at the center of these parties. A wave of laughter would crash in from the living room. And when I peered inside, he would be there telling everyone his stories. The one everyone seemed to love to hear him tell was the "yes, sir" story. Even though they had all heard it before, he would begin the story as if they hadn't. He told them how he said, "Yes, sir," in English at work whenever anyone told him what to do, but he said it with the tone and force of a "fuck you." Then he marched around the room and saluted everyone like a dutiful soldier, saying in English, "Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir," each time. He cackled with glee at how the people at work thought he was so polite and nice. One last passage, and then we'll start the Q&A. Picking worms. I didn't like how the worms felt in my hands, so cold and slimy and raw. There was no mistaking they were alive. They never stopped slinking and slithering around, stretching their bodies out into such a length that I wasn't even sure these were worms I had just picked. I could feel their bodies pulse and throb and tickle my hands, and they would jab at me with a head or tail. I couldn't tell which. Both ends looked the same to me. I wanted to scream, to yell out how gross it all was, and to throw them back to the ground, but I didn't want to shame my mother in front of everyone, so I held on. This was a job wanted by many, and I was lucky my mom got me in. I thought of my father then, what he would think of us doing this, picking worms, what he would say. My father was a good man. I often wondered if my mother would marry again. Most of the people we knew were married or had someone. When I asked if she was ever lonely and sad, listening to her Elvis tapes late at night in her room, she said, "What do you want me to do? Get one of them white guys? Can you imagine? They'll probably want me to say things like, 'Me love me a long time,' and pump me like one of those hogs. I got my pride, and I ain't lowering it for no man. I'd rather be alone."
I don't know if I am needed anymore. I'm a moderator about this, but I'm already broken. So so firstly, I feel like I need to do this. This is so unnecessary. So thank you for having me on the stage, Souvankham.
I'm so grateful that you're here and we get to talk to each other.
Yes, and well, since I was already broken, so from I've been moderating for quite some time, and today I feel like this is the hardest day for me to moderate, and it's hard for me to come up with questions. I've been reading through your book, How to Pronounce Knife, It's a book that kind of uplifts my reading spirit once again. I have a confession to make. Actually, I gave up reading completely a while ago because I feel like words don't make sense anymore. They are just there, lying like cheap thrills to me. It doesn't make sense in the world where we're bombarded by these cheap thrills, those sounds and sights that don't make sense but try to win our attention in a way. But your book is just there, much like you. It's a quiet book. It's delicate, it's subtle, it's beautiful and powerful. And it's totally regained my reading spirit once again. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you started off by being a poet, I
Yes.
believe.
Yes.
Yes, and I can't help but observe the repetition of words that you
Yes.
use in your short stories. And those words, they have meanings in every word. So I feel refreshed. I feel like I am hopeful once again about reading. And I thank the God of reading, if there is one, that I stumbled upon your book. Yeah, and how your experience as a poet help you, in the process of your writing short stories?
I was at a literary festival, and I was the only poet as part of the panel. And then afterwards, we went and did a book signing, and there was nobody in my line. Everybody else was lining up for the novelists. And even though there was nobody in my line, I wanted to say that I do that work too. It's just called something else. And that I had earned my right to sit there. And if nobody was in my line, I was going to sit there and make them look at me. So, like, my experience with writing poetry is that there are so few readers of poetry. And when I think about that, every time I see a reader of poetry or someone buying a poetry book, I know that that is their want. Like, they did everything that they could possibly can to teach themselves to love and to like poetry. Because even at school, you learn that, oh, I don't like poetry because it's hard, or you don't understand it. And I don't like that attitude about poetry. And so when I'm writing poetry, I always try to make it clear, spare, and bare. And then when I moved to fiction, I wanted to kind of trick fiction readers that the thing that you're reading and calling fiction is actually my poetry.
So every word does have meaning to you, but do those words come to you easily? I feel like you are someone who are super at ease with using words, but obviously you aren't, because you said in the slide that it takes probably years to find that particular word that probably it's still waiting for you there. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually an inside joke to myself. The word perfect. I wrote a poem called Perfect, and it's about a girl who grows up living in a van, and she calls that a perfect life. And whenever we use the word perfect, we have our own interpretations of that word. And the way that I use it in the poem, I change the meaning in a way that we're familiar with it when it's used. So that's what I mean. Like, it took me 12 years to write that one poem. Sometimes it does take that long, and other times it takes an afternoon to write a story. I have a story in my book called Slingshot, and I wrote that in an afternoon. Are words easy or difficult? I think it's easy, but I don't know if I'm saying that because I've been writing for more than 25 years. and sometimes they're difficult, but every word has a weight and meaning. One of my favorite responses to my writing came from a 5-year-old. She told me, I like your writing because it's real.
So is it real, or it's out of question?
Like, even though I'm writing fiction, the goal is to make it feel real. Everything, it's even harder because you, as the writer, I get to hold the truth of the story. Like, I know what's real, but as the reader, you're only given what I put on the page, and my job is to make you feel that what you see and hear on the page is real, and that you can't believe it's not real.
I believe they are real too, because even I haven't met you before. I just met you on Thursday, and the first time I saw you, I was like, this is Souvankham Thammavongsa. I knew right away at that moment, because you have this particular aura of being calm, being at ease yourself, and being confident in all that stillness. And I know it's you. And I think you are, to me, you are familiar. You are very similar to the book that you've been writing. So do you get this feedback a lot?
Well, when I use words, I want the words to be the thing that people see and look at, not me. I don't like that, in the literary world, your life, who you are outside the book, sometimes takes center stage, which is why I really love when I get to present with my PowerPoint, because I'm asking you not to look at me. I'm asking you to look at my words, which to me, it's something that I hold most valuable.
And the thing that feels super real for me is that your stories featured many female characters, and those characters, they are brutally honest and fierce and uncompromising in so many ways. They are also diverse, ranging from very young girl to young adults to very old women. So is it hard for you to formulate those voices of those female characters featured in your stories, especially the younger girls?
Not at all, because I'm one of those girls, and also my friends and my family are like the women in my book. There's a scene in the book from a short story where there's this man who sees these little girls, and every time he sees them, he calls them sexy. He yells it across the room. And, as little girls, we're taught to be afraid, run away, and hide. But, when I was growing up, I wasn't like that at all. I would be someone who would say, I'll cut it off. We'll see what's sexy then. So, I didn't see those kinds of scenes in books. You probably are familiar with, the American movie Full Metal Jacket, where a woman says $10, $10, $10. And like in the movies, they do that. And as a fiction writer, I get to change that. And and to write about female characters in ways that we don't often get to see them. The ones who run the family, who has the successful job, the little girl who says, I'll cut it off.
Those words are like you have been stabbing me with the knife, your words. I am super overwhelmed with all the things that you've been reading, and it's still hard for me. It's still hard to really, when I stumble upon your book, it just feels like a life-changing experience, I know that your mother is always here with us today, and I have a chat with her, and I feel like somehow she's exactly what I imagine her to be, you know, in many of your female characters that have been featured in your short stories. Is that
I
a
think
thing?
I think
Yeah,
you're right. A lot of people say that when they meet my mother, they felt they already know her. So it's really nice for me to feel that I've made something, and you don't have to know the thing that I made.
So your works mostly revolve around ordinary lives of ordinary people, how you find beauty in those ordinary things and ordinary events. Do those stories, those people, those events all line up in your head and waiting to be written out, or you just draw it partly from your experiences?
I really love the ordinary. Anytime you hear narratives from writers of color, it tends to focus on their grief and their trauma, their sadness. And I remember visiting a book club, and after I finished reading, one of the comments was, "Where's the culture?" And in reader responses on Goodreads, sometimes people are very confused and very angry at me because they don't understand why I'm writing about ordinary people, people who just want to fall in love, bury their dead, have a meal together. But I think that's what art is. You can take the ordinary and you can make it art.
I agree. But do readers, especially your readers, do they have certain expectations about your work or what you would write, especially the experiences of being a daughter of refugees or being immigrants?
Yeah, that's something I think about all the time. What people expect me to write. In some ways, it's very inspiring because I want to kick against those expectations. It's always a surprise whenever, you know, like when I write that scene where the man is saying, yes, sir, yes, sir. But he's actually saying something else with his tone.
Yes, I do, you know, feel stuck with that chapter also, and another chapter with a woman that you read just earlier, a woman who laughed hysterically while looking at herself in the mirror and with her mouth gaping, and then she trying to find where the voice comes from. So this is it. You know, this chapter gives me that image that stuck with me for a long while, and it echoed in my head. I don't know how to describe your style of writing, but what would you describe your own style of writing, or should it be left undescribed?
I like. I'm, it's been my style of writing has been described as minimalist, and I don't like that word. I rather be more precise and call it something like bare and spare.
Bare and spare and very clean and sharp, I would say. It's refreshing, it's new, you know. And what I love about the use of language and the use of words in your book is that sometimes, from time to time, words in Lao language appear, and then it shocked me. Some of the words shocked me really, and I didn't expect to find or stumble upon these words in an award-winning book. Do I need to mention that word?
It's hin kiao. And in the book, when you stumble upon it, every time you see a writer, a different language that is not the English language, it's often italicized, or the writer does so much work to translate it for you. But in my book, I don't. And one of the lovely things is because that word is not in the English language, if I went on a radio show or a TV show and I read that, it would not be bleeped out because people don't know that it's a bad word. So what it is, hi kyo is it means like slutty. But it's a really, it's not like a city slut or a sophisticated slut. It's like a countryside dirty slut. and and of course, you know, when I show my book to Lao people, I like to turn to that page, and then you know, I'm using the English language, but I'm winking in the English language at the English language. So whenever you encounter the Lao words, it's in the English language, and I don't differentiate or other the word for you.
Yeah, that word is just there. And as a Thai, I can understand a little bit of Lao language. And when I stumble upon that word, I was like, yeah, finally someone put that word in the world of Western literature. You know, that word should have been shown up, you know, in the Western sphere for long time, because that's a sassy word. I love that word. Heal everyone. You know, and as a reader, you know, I've been it kind of it melting my heart, you know, that I have a notion that I get to meet you someday, because as a reader, I don't want to get myself, you know, in contact with the writers. It's a risky business. It's a risky thing to do, to just to get close to the writer that you admire, whose book that, you know, changed your life. It's the case with How to Pronounce Nai for me, and I am beyond thankful to get to meet you. And so from your perspective, how how relationship between readers and writers should be? I mean, are they supposed to meet each other?
Um,
I'm broken right now. Sorry.
I always worry about that because I'm afraid, you know, I don't want people to reach out. I'm not that nice. And also, I'm afraid that I'm going to be disappointing. You know, like for me, there's a real grand difference between the book I made and who I am. And a lot of times people like the book and they forget that there's a person behind the book. And you know, I see that they've had an experience that I haven't had, and I wasn't there, but my books were. And so always meeting me in person is a disappointment.
Oh, it's a whole new experience for me, because it's the first time I am ashamed of myself sitting here broken in front of everybody. I normally don't get to know, you know, any other readers, because I normally read on my own in isolation, and it's strange for me to meet other readers and exchange personally for me. And being here on stage with the audience in front of you, it's another thing. Thank you for this experience. So anyone, if you have questions, please feel free to chip in. The lady at the back.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the talk. The talk is fun. Both of you, very fun and very thought-provoking. It's overwhelming to hear Souvankham read the lines at the very beginning when you show us the PowerPoint. And my interest lies in these lines. You say that writers don't have to come from writers. You said, my parents are not writers, if I remember it correctly.
That's right.
My parents are not writers. Writers don't have to come from writers. Writers come from home. So I just wonder, what is your inspiration for writing? Is it the home that is your inspiration? What is your muse? And my second question is that, how much is your work, whether it's poetry, which you describe as bear and spare, which I really like very much. And you also talk about the common. And the common reflects the universal, all of us. So I wonder how much is your work, poetic work, your collection of short story is autobiographical, because your biodata is very unique, very different, and admirable, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think anything can inspire me. And I think one of the valuable things that I have in my life is the idea of not knowing. I know that when you're a writer, you're expected to know things, but I find that boring and limiting. What comes to mind quickly is I thought that the New York Times and the New Yorker were things that you can only get in New York. And, not having a sense of what those things are also, in a way, makes me feel fearless. Like, nobody told me, you can't be a writer unless you know other writers, or you know the language, or you know the book publishing business. I didn't know any of all that. I just thought, to be a writer, you write, you have a book. And that's how I started. I printed and bound my own books because I wanted to see my own self on a bookshelf. I didn't want a publisher or an agent to wait and come and get me. I wanted to do that for myself.
Another question? Yeah. Okay.
I'm Malika.
Hi.
And I'm a teacher. And what you said really struck me when you talked about how, in English we talk about, poems being very hard, and that's part of why maybe there isn't as much of a market for poetry. One of my passions is kind of fostering that love for poetry. And as a poet, what are some things you wish teachers did more in the classroom to foster that love?
To bring in work they love. Like, if the curriculum suggests that one poet that they want everyone, I don't know, in grade 2 to teach, maybe question if that's the right book to be teaching to make the students love poetry. Like, as a teacher, what you're teaching, I'm pretty sure that you love that work. And when you love that work, the children see how you love that work, and it's more meaningful than something that might feel perfunctory.
Thank you.
Okay. Another question with the gentleman over there.
Also a teacher, and have spent much of my career working with students that are living in a different culture than where they're originally from. Some refugee, some embassy student, type situations, but all struggling with the concept of identity, growing up somewhere than where they're not from, and very different. I wanted you to maybe speak on your experience of trying to find identity and advice you'd give young people in that striving when it's growing up somewhere that maybe you're very different from, or have a very different background from yourself.
I grew up in Canada, and in Canada, you're allowed to define and form what your identity is. The idea of America, everybody understands what that is. But like in Canada, you're encouraged to speak the language of your home, and that makes the country stronger, because you get to have Canada and also who you are originally. Like, you're not asked to forget where you're from, or your language, or the food that you love and eat. You're actually encouraged to bring that forward, and that makes the fact that you're different and is like a Canadian thing that is encouraged and uplifted. I'm not made to feel like I want to belong because I feel like I'm there, so I belong.
Any other question? I think our time is up, but yeah, someone is nodding. Okay, time is up. As much as I'm sad to say goodbye to you, but I'm a little bit happy too that I want to, just go off stage and go lie in tears and die peacefully. Thank you so much, Souvankham. Thank you.
Thank you.